All right, we're live. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining the April 2017 Exchange Essay Chat on sports physical therapy titled The Good, the Bad, and the Future. So I have two incredible guests that I'm about to introduce in a second, but thank you so much for joining. We're really excited to have you and really excited to answer your questions. So as you kind of start filing in, develop those questions. We're here and we're ready to answer all of them. We're going to chat for about an hour, depending on what you have for us. So very excited for that. Let's see. Let's introduce our guests. So first up, Sue Falsone. Thank you, Sue, so much for joining us. So I'll give a little brief introduction, and then I'll allow the both of you to give a more extended introduction so that our viewers kind of have a little bit of knowledge behind who they're listening to. So, Sue, you have an incredible background. You were the first female, please correct me if I'm wrong, first female head athletic trainer and PT in the MLB. With you spent some time with the Dodgers. You spent time in Arizona at Athletes Performance, now known as Exos. You're an associate professor for the athletic training program at A.T. Still University in Mesa, Arizona. And then you're the owner of Structure and Function Education and Dry Needling. Is that all right? I just want to make sure that.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, and then I had a little stint in there as the head athletic trainer for the U.S. men's national team too.
Oh yes, that's right. That's right.
Other than that, yeah, pretty complete.
Awesome.
In a paragraph.
Next up, we have Mike Ryan. So, Mike, you have a 26-year history in the NFL as an athletic trainer and a physical therapist. You're now a sports medicine analyst for Sunday Night Football. So you spend a lot of time doing that. And then one thing I really appreciate, I loved so much, because you really live it. You're a 6-time Ironman triathlete. That's incredible.
Well, thank you.
Yes, that's incredible. So, Mike, anything else that you'd like to mention about your background?
Well, I think since I was a sophomore in high school, I wanted to be an athletic trainer and physical therapist in the NFL. And I just feel real fortunate. I had 26 years to do it, 6 years as an assistant in New York with the New York Giants, and then 20 years as a head athletic trainer, physical therapist with the Giants. And just feel very blessed. I had a fun career, love what I did, and I love being around athletes, helping athletes, and also myself being an athlete. It's important to me professionally and personally. Yeah,
that's great. I couldn't agree more. I just spent time in my last clinical rotation, actually at Exos, and that was so important. Of the culture and the philosophy there was to really live it, to be an athlete. So that's great. Really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Sue, anything else that you would like to mention about your background?
Yeah, I've not done 6 Ironmans. I haven't done one. I haven't even done a triathlon. No, that's about it. I am definitely more of the yoga-based practitioner.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. All right. So for all of our viewers, we have some intro tweets. So if you're on Twitter, I'm going to drop these tweets here pretty soon. So the first one is we want to know who's joining us tonight. So please shout out your name, your year, and your school. And I have a little poll ready to kind of take this information. So want to know if you're a DPT student, PTA student, or fresh PT, or any other individual. So are you practicing clinician? Are you a patient? Anyone else, any other professional? We'd really like to hear about that, about our audience. And then the second one I just posted as well was, how did you hear about this exchange chat? So share those details with us. And if there's anyone here for the first time, would also love to hear that. So did you hear about it on Twitter, on Facebook, word of mouth, or any other medium like an email or come into our website? Would also love that information. All right. So I got some questions for you guys. I'm going to be a little selfish at first and just get my questions out of the way. So Sue, the first one's for you. The last time I saw you actually was here in Arizona at the Arizona Student Conclave. and you gave an incredible lecture on the overhead athlete. And you actually spoke about your new book that you're writing, which was great. You had some time to really break down your system. And I'd love to kind of give our viewers a little bit more information about that. So please take as much time as you need. Just kind of curious about everything you're developing.
Yeah. So I made the decision last summer to write a book, and it was probably the worst professional decision I've ever made. I wish someone would have warned me how difficult this process is. Because it's like literally one of the hardest things I've ever done. So I'm in my first edits right now, and it was supposed to be Christmas time, and then it was supposed to be beginning of this summer, and now it's looking more like fall or maybe Christmas of next year. It really just outlines my philosophy and my thought process of bridging the gap from rehab to performance and sort of what that looks like. And so it was great to be able to present that to the students of Arizona a couple weeks ago and kind of just talk about how do we work through that? How do we organize all of this stuff that you guys are going to have the opportunity to do once you graduate? There's all of these amazing continuing education courses, and sort of, everyone's preaching that they have the answer, right? But if someone actually had the answer, we would all be doing it. There would be no choices for us to make. We would all be doing the right thing. Yeah. But there's so many ways to skin the cat, right? There's so many different variables, and everybody's so individual. So instead of trying to just sort of put yourself behind one guru, I suppose, like trying to find a system that's sort of all encompassing. And I guess that's how I practice in general, is very all encompassing, be it with other practitioners, chiropractors, acupuncturists, strength coaches, physical therapists, athletic trainers. Like, I definitely don't define people by their letters. And so really kind of being able to create this holistic, inclusive approach to bridging the gap from rehab to performance. And that's actually what the book is called. And so we just kind of break down, how do we fit all of these things into play? So for example, yoga is a great example. Yoga's I always have this kind of talk with Michael Boyle, who's a good friend of mine. And he's like, Sue, I hate yoga. Yoga is so stupid. And I'm like, Michael, yoga is not stupid, right? It's great if you're sort of focusing on the somatosensory aspect of the body, if you're trying to improve balance and reflexes and possibly mobility and body control. But it's a horrible choice if you're trying to increase or improve somebody's rate of force development and power ability, right? So we have to just sort of figure out what these categories are, and hopefully I've defined that comprehensively, and sort of just be able to sort of fit these things, all of our interventions, into these different, places, because there's so much to work on. So we've got to identify the pain generator. We have to improve the motion segment. Muscles need to act accordingly. Let synergists be synergists, let agonists be agonists, let prime movers be prime movers. We've got to work on reflexes and all of those sorts of things. We have to work on strength, and then we have to be able to express that strength as a form of power. And then once you have that power, you have to be able to apply it to whatever sport you're trying to apply that power to. And so truly finding a way to bridge that gap from rehab to performance is really sort of what my passion's always been, and what the book is about.
That was incredible. So you effortlessly just described, I think, what took, like, in that lecture. That was perfect. That was like a perfect summary of what you described in your lecture. So hopefully that gives students an idea of what you're thinking and what you're trying to accomplish. Sue, in my last clinical rotation at Exos here in Phoenix, that was all that I spent my time doing, right? Really trying to bridge those two gaps, and they do it well there. So yeah, really, really appreciate that.
Hey, Sue, can I pre-order that book right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll get you on the copy list.
All right.
Yeah, that takes, two, please, two.
Got it.
I need that as well. Mike, I want to turn to you next. So, Mike, in following your work and all the things that you've done, I've noticed that you speak to professional athletes quite a bit. Yeah. And I just recently listened to a short clip on Twitter, and you were sharing a message about, for athletes, taking care of their body, their mind, and their business. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about that, and maybe even talk about, for physical therapy students, aspiring to be DPTs in the future, and PTA students, physical therapy assistants? What role will it play in that?
Sure. Well, I think it's so important. You have to take care of your body. You have to take care of your mind. And like I say, you have to take care of your business, because as an athlete at any level, your body is your ticket. And taking care of it the right way and doing the right kind of things early on, the maintenance, even a simple thing that I put a lot of emphasis on is recovery. And a lot of times a simple thing of taking care of yourself, the recovery, what you do after a workout can make a world of difference. And when I look at an athlete who does well in the second half of the season, it's easy to say that person's a great athlete. Look how strong or how fast she is. A lot of times I look at it and say, well, maybe that person just recovered better than the next person, because that can make a big difference of getting better each day and not regressing. And we see that a lot in the NFL when an athlete comes from a much more limited schedule in a college program, and then they come to the NFL and they have a huge requirement in a longer season. That fatigue and overuse injuries can really be a problem. So taking care of their body and learning the little tricks, because athletic trainers and physical therapists and all the entities that Sue did a great job of describing, they all have an important part of keeping those athletes healthy, but the player has to be part of that equation as well. The recovery and the strengthening and the performance and the pain management, that isn't a passive process. There's an active component to that the athletes themselves have to realize, and sooner than later, because I've had thousands of players come into the NFL and just not quite get it or not put the effort into it. Next thing you know, they're on the outside looking in like, wait a minute, I didn't have the opportunity to really express myself athletically because they didn't take care of themselves early on. So I think it's real important to teach athletes at a young age how to take care of their body, how to take care of their mind. Athletes, an average person, athletes is a much higher number, but the average person talks to themselves about 1,000 words per minute. There's a recording that they're continuing to tell themselves over and over, well, what's that message? And that message can be programmed. And you see really good athletes, and like I always say, when I see successful athletes, they have successful routines. And part of that is working on their mind and focusing on things and positive affirmations. Well, I think a lot of times in this society, I see a lot of athletes put on the headphones and let outside music or outside trash talk or outside influences change their internal message. And that's a problem. So I think helping athletes understand that, and you say, well, this is stuff that takes place above the neck, not just below the neck. But I think if you're going to be good in sports physical therapy, you better be good at dealing both above the neck and below the neck. And the last part is taking care of their business. And that can be everything from what they do, or probably more importantly, what they don't put out in social media. I've been in a lot of meetings getting ready for the draft and free agency where they're pulling up all these special text messages and things that athletes have done. And trust me, what's out there, people are going to know it. And a lot of times people hurt themselves. They hurt their business, as I like to say, by putting the wrong messages out there as an athlete. And that could be a real problem. I've seen that at all levels. And I just think people getting the message and working with these athletes and the bond, and Sue will tell you, as a sports physical therapist, a lot of what we do with the athletes has nothing to do with medicine. It has to deal with the people. It's a people business, and knowing how to communicate and relate to these individuals. We're in a very unique role of taking care of them, and they can confide in us and tell us stuff they tell no one else in the organization, and that all comes down to trust. So there's a lot there. It's something I get really excited about, but it's just a cool part of what we do with our job, taking care of athletes day in and day out. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I definitely experienced that on my last rotation. Sue, would you like to weigh in on anything Mike just said?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it, Mike. I think that at least for me, I mean, I graduated from PT school a very long time ago, but at the time I was not equipped, and I'm still probably not that equipped to deal with the mindset and the psychology of what is happening with these athletes. And that is so much what we do, and so much of a space where I have put a lot of my personal effort to try to understand more, because like Mike said, I mean, he hit it nail on the head. Like, most of what we deal with is not only physical, but mental, and the mental is obviously going to affect the physical. So it really starts with their own perceptions and some of the things that they are dealing with, like he said, above the neck. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Cruz,
I think,
if I could add some kind of piggyback on that and what Sue started with initially, and I can think of the student athletic trainers and physical therapists out there listening to this and like, this stuff is heavy. There's a lot there. But like Sue said, taking all these entities, all these specialties in and bring them together to treat athletes, there's a science behind that, and learning those things and learning what works, learning what doesn't work. Experience as a physical therapist, we learn what tools to use and what tools not to use. So if it seems kind of daunting for a student athletic trainer, like, oh my God, now I got to put sports psychology into my repertoire. These things will come if you're listening and you're communicating and having the communication skills. And you do a certain mob on someone, if suddenly you pre-test them and you do a mob on a finger, let's just say, to keep it real simple, and you lose range of motion, that's a great thing, because if you do the opposite mob, in theory, you're going to increase range of motion. So if you're getting answers and you're perceptive to those answers, be it something of the mind or something of the body, it's going to help you develop those skills and work with that athlete to get that Rubik's Cube approach, so to speak, of finding the right tools that work with an athlete to get them better, be it better today or tomorrow or for the weekend's game. So small chunk it is, I think, the key that these student physical therapists have to realize, that it's daunting now, but if your antenna's up and you're perceptive and you're listening and reaching out to those specialists, this isn't my sandbox, my tools, I'm the only one going to play with these. You have to be receptive to other specialties and learn from them as they want to learn from you.
Yeah.
It's so piggyback on that even more.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Like Mike, that's a perfect point, right? Like, it can seem so daunting. And so one of the things whenever I'm working with students that I tell them, it just starts with a great subjective, and just, we all want to get to the objective portion of our exam really quickly, right? That's where all the cool special tests are, and we get to kind of move them around and show off what we know. But I mean, I spend more time talking to my patient now and doing their subjective than I do probably objectively evaluating. Because if you ask the right questions and they'll lead you down to what has worked, what hasn't worked, what will work, what the problem is. And just the fact that you're listening to them, you might be the first person to actually just sit down and let them talk for 5 or 10 minutes. Everyone's usually interrupting them and asking them different questions, and just sort of being that first person who lets them talk is huge psychologically for them to just get it off their chest and what is bothering them and what is hurting. That's gigantic. So it starts with a great subjective.
Sue, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
I think this is a great opportunity. What's your favorite question to ask a patient?
Ooh, that's a great question right there. I always ask them, I probably have a couple, but I always ask them, what's going on? You tell me what you think the issue is. And then I always ask them, and what do you feel like you're being limited by? Or like, what do you feel like your biggest limitation is? So making sure that they get out what they feel like their problem is, what their area of pain is, and what their functional limitation is. I think so often we put on them, oh, you have an ACL tear, so you're having trouble cutting, running, whatever. No, yeah. I don't lead them into those. What's your pain? You tell me your pain, and you tell me what you feel like you're limited by, whatever that may be.
Perfect.
Those are probably my two most important questions. But what's yours? I want to know.
Because I agree. Because I think asking the questions, something I've got very good at doing is diagnosing over the phone with family and friends all over the world, and just say, okay, put your foot in this position and turn and poke and prod up in here, and that gets you very good at doing a hands-off evaluation and good question and answer. I think the two questions I love asking is, one is, if you were to wave a magic wand, how would it change your body to get you where you want to be? And they can say, look, I just want to get rid of that. They'll be talking about this and this and this, and suddenly they say, I just want to get rid of that pain right there when my knee extends. So it's a great way to find out, where they are and where they want to be, and what does the distance between those two, what's that turf look like?
That's good. I like that.
The other thing I probably ask them is I get very in depth about asking them to describe their pain, because all pain is not created equal. And tell me about the pain. It hurts right there. It's killing me. Well, the different types of pain, from the stabbing pain, the shooting pain, the pins and needles, the throbbing, the toothache. There's so many different types of pains, and a lot of times if they can narrow in where the pain is and give me a good description and say, yeah, that's what it is. It's pins and needles, because they don't always know how to describe that. And that immediately, as you know, Stu, it can say, okay, that sounds just like a nerve or fascia issue. No, that's bone pain.
Yep.
So if you can use selective tension and take for those types of tissues and kind of put them off the side for now and be focused on, okay, we're talking about an articular cartilage issue or bone based on that description. Boom, your focus, your laser focus compared to that floodlight of looking at all those issues.
Absolutely.
The detective part of the PT stuff, which I get excited about.
Yeah, I do too. That's the fun part.
Guys,
sorry, I know it's your show, Cruiser. Go ahead.
No, this is
sorry, Mike,
no, this is incredible. This is incredible. I've like, I know everyone watching knows how much I can talk, but I just got to step back and just let you guys kind of take it. This is so many gems. Seriously, I think with the explosion of pain science research that's coming out and all about, that we're all hearing about soft skills and communication skills. It's incredible to hear two veteran therapists really talk about how important that is. We have not once talked about mechanics or anything, right? We're not really diving really deep. It seems like you guys just keep talking about these really key things that help you connect with your patient and understanding pain that will really help them advance. So I think for a lot of students that don't have a lot of clinical experience, maybe I'm wondering if you guys can maybe ease my fears, because I also kind of experienced this as well, that maybe just focusing on those soft skills, those communication skills, things that we can really have down right now as we're improving our clinical experience and understanding these clinical patterns a little bit better. I'm wondering if you guys think that would help,
I think it would. One thing I learned in my athletic training curriculum at Central Connecticut State, Carl Krein is the head athletic trainer there. He's since retired, and he was like a second father to me. He was an amazing guy, and he taught us great evaluation skills. And something he did, I didn't appreciate till later, and I still do it, decades later, is he taught us to go through our whole evaluation process and get deep into our special testing before we do our palpation. Yeah. Which most clinicians say, no, time out, that doesn't work. But what it does, it helps me get the big picture and then focus in on the issue, because you start poking, okay, you're sore on the tip of the kneecap, okay, upper proximal patella tendon, you get jumper's knee, and you get down that rabbit hole. But if you hold off a little bit more on the palpatory skills in the evaluation and you get a thorough evaluation about what's there, and suddenly you realize, wait a minute, there's a gastroc component here. Mm-hmm. And I never would have saw that if I put my blinders on and focus on the patella tendon and it hurts here and you start pushing really hard. It could be an easy diagnosis and it may be a secondary diagnosis. But I think that question and answer, what's making it better? Because really when you do something, only three things can happen. It's going to get better, it's going to get worse, or it's going to be no change. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it comes down to a simple question like that about, tell me what makes it better, and then shut up and let them talk. Get the information. Sometimes, these guys or gals, you got to, well, no. Let's keep these answers nice and short. I'm going to ask you a short question. You give me a short answer. So you don't get them, especially guilty as charged as a runner. You can babble on the type of shoes you've been wearing for the last, 1,800 miles. But getting those simple answers, what makes it better, and listen, what makes it worse, and going from there. So the question and the subjective part can make your job a lot easier. And like you alluded to, Cruz, build that rapport with that athlete early on.
Yeah. It goes back to what Sue was talking about earlier, just really taking the time to take a really good subjective and, using that to create your hypothesis list. I really, really love that. We got to move forward. There are a ton of questions coming in. So that was an incredible conversation. Thank you both for dropping all of those pearls. So let's kind of start with a few questions here. So these first two are pretty similar. So Ali Breaky asks, I'll just ask them both at the same time and we can kind of go back and forth. Ali Breaky asks, what advice do you have to the DPT student and PTA student who would like to get involved in sports PT? And then the second question is Nick Steller on Facebook asks, hey, Sue, just wanted to say I'm a huge fan of your accomplishments, being the first woman to be an ATC in major sports for my favorite team. What advice would you have for us starting our careers as PTs who might want to get involved in collegiate or professional athletics for the future? So, Sue, we'll start with you, and then, Mike, we'll head over to you.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you for that compliment. That's really sweet. I always tell people to meet as many people as they possibly can in the league that they want to work in. I always tell them, if you want to work in baseball, you need to make sure you get to the PBATS conference in January. And then when someone has a great talk, you need to stand in line and wait and introduce yourself to that person, and let them put a face to the name, and let them just at least recognize who you are, and walk around the exhibit hall and just meet people. The best way is to really meet people. I mean, it's not, a lot of it is who you know, and being at the right place at the right time, and being around when someone has an opportunity available for you. I watched Al Vermeil give a keynote once. Al Vermeil was the longtime head strength coach for the Bulls during their magic time, during their heyday. And he said something that really resonated with me one time. Luck is when preparedness meets opportunity, right? And so you've got to be prepared. It's not just about, who might get you in the door, and so you've got to be prepared for that opportunity when it comes to you. And so that's luck. I mean, I was definitely lucky when I got that opportunity with the Dodgers, and I was ready for it, and I was in the right place at the right time, and that was definitely luck. And so it's really about the relationships that you make in meeting people, in my opinion. And so I just always tell young people and young students, get out there, meet these lecturers, meet these people who you want to be with, or drop emails. I answer, I may not want to say this right now, but I answer all the emails that people send me. It might take me 2 weeks to get to you, but I really do. I mean, Cruz, you emailed me, after my first lecture, and we've stayed in touch ever since. Like, you'll be surprised who emails you back. Everybody won't email you back. Everybody won't call you back, but you'd be surprised at who will. And I make a concerted effort to really email back students and kind of stay in touch with them, whether it's on social media or whatever, because I feel like that's the right thing to do. So you'd be surprised who else has that mentality as well.
That's great, Sue. Yeah, I completely agree. I keep hearing this over and over again from a lot of my mentors. They talk about just showing up, just being there, and making yourself available, and taking that time to introduce yourself, and people will remember you. The ones that you really want to hang around with are the ones that will remember you. So thanks for saying that. I think that will help a lot of students. Mike, what are your thoughts on all that?
I agree with what Sue said, but I take it a step further when it comes to the NFL. I was the president of the Professional Football Athletic Trainers Society Research and Education Foundation for 14 years. And we did just an easy, quick survey with all our athletic trainers in the NFL, full-time athletic trainers. And of those, 88% of the head athletic trainers in the NFL had done an NFL internship, and 83% of the NFL assistant full-time athletic trainers had done an NFL internship. So people say, how do I get in the NFL? And I say, do an internship, because that's so important. I had a bad experience with one of my first assistants I hired here in Jacksonville, and it didn't work out because he didn't have any NFL experience, and it just did not work. And I said right then, I won't hire anybody unless they've had at least an internship and had NFL experience, because it's very different. You can be great in one sport and you go to a different sport and it's very different. The people, the hours, the travel, the environment. So I tell people, Sue says it's important to know those people in those professions, but I think it's also very important to get the experience in those professions. Volunteer for camps, volunteer for high school camps. Get involved with things, because you need to have that exposure to know that's something you really want to do. Whenever I got my interns every year, we take 3 interns every summer, and I'd have 1 or 2 full-time interns during the season in the NFL. And what I'd always say to them in the very first day, I'd say, when you get done with this internship, one thing is going to be very, very clear. Either you do or don't want to work in the NFL. And I've had a lot of interns get done and say, Mr. Ryan, thank you for the opportunity to work in the NFL. It's not for me. I want to work professional baseball or something. And I say, great. You can kind of check it off your list and go, focus on another profession that's really important. So you need to know whether you like this or don't like this, not when you're a year or 2 into it, but before you step over that line. Yep. And the other part is, it allows people that are key people in this profession to get to know you, to know how you work, and to know your skills. And if you're bringing strong skill sets and personalities and communication skills to the table, you want those people to know that. And that's something you don't always get off a resume or a handshake at a conference. Doing it when you're out there sweating on the field and have that opportunity in that kind of setting, I think that's an important step.
Yeah. Mike, you said something really key there. You talked about volunteering, getting out there, and you also mentioned the hours. So my clinical rotation, so I was at Exos during the combine, and we easily during that whole training process would probably put in 60-hour work weeks, and that was
I was like, dang,
that was putting it light.
It's part-time.
That was putting it light, right? That was putting it light, and so it's great to hear you say that. And I think that's one thing that I would really like to have all students really understand is it's a long process, and it's a lot of work that you put in. And one precedent that I set for myself was that I'm just going to really try and push it and give all that I can. And I think one thing that I developed was just say yes to whatever I can possible, right? So if my CI or whoever on the team really needed anything, I would just do it. I would be the first one to volunteer for everything. And then in turn, I found that they were making me do more stuff, right? So then they'd say, hey, Cruz, I want you to come do this mobilization, or hey, Cruz, I want you to screen this patient out for whatever it is. And so not being afraid to do that dirty work when it needs to get done. Any thoughts there?
And I think that's real important for a couple of reasons. Is in a traditional physical therapy setting, it's not really like that. In sports physical therapy, as Sue would tell you, it's very different. The hours are crazy. If you got to go, I get calls at 2 o'clock in the morning, and sometimes I'd have to, jump on my car and race down to treat someone if something happened. You name it, it can happen. So when you step over the threshold of being into sports, the normal hours are completely out of the equation because you're working different hours, you're traveling, you're getting home sometimes at 3 o'clock in the morning, you're going to be back at work at 6 a.m. That's 3 hours, and so you have to be able to do that. And I think the traditional physical therapy student struggles with that. So I think if you get that exposure in that sports setting, that's going to be a big eye-opening. And you'd say, like I said, you're going to like it or not like it, but you can't get caught up in people say, oh, you're working for professional sport. That's so cool. Well, it is very cool. And there's a lot of upside to it, but there's a lot of things you just have to know. And I never complained about the hours because I knew what I was getting into. I did 3 summer internships before I started full-time. So I knew exactly what I was getting into. And getting that exposure and knowing that and doing those non-traditional things. An example, what you said, Cruz, is the old saying, if you want to get something done, give it to a busy man or a busy woman because they're going to get it done. It seems contradictory, but if you have that personality and in a sports setting, you have to have that personality to take care of business. So if you're good at it, people are going to continue to bring things to you, but that gives you job security, and that's a good thing.
Yeah. Sue, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, nothing necessarily to add. I think that's exactly right. I mean, there are crazy things that I think sometimes your traditional PT student may not be prepared for or think that they're not going to have to do. And I mean, I've lugged a lot of water coolers in my day, as I'm sure Mike has too,
Yeah.
right? And, folded a lot of towels, and, it's not all glamour and glitz, no doubt. So you've got to be prepared to work hard, and unless you've had that internship experience or been in that setting, it's not your 8 to 5 Monday through Friday job by any means.
Yeah. I'm so glad. I'm so glad we mentioned that. I think that'll be a really huge key that people take away from this conversation. Okay. So
with that, Cruz,
please,
just a quick statement is because of those demands, it's very important that the physical therapists take care of themselves. Stress management is a big, big component. We don't learn in school, but it's a big part with this. To take care of yourself and, the yoga stuff like Sue does and keeping yourself in shape physically and mentally and doing those kind of things helps your happiness when you get away from work, but also keeps you from getting hurt. When you start stretching guys, I've had guys report to the Jaguars as high as 404 pounds. That's a big man. That's a big hamstring to be stretching and working on and he had a low back injury. It made it interesting, but you have to be in shape to do these kind of things. You just can't punch in and punch out. So preparing yourself, like we talked earlier, above and below the neck as a physical therapist is real important to do your job well and to do it for a long time.
I actually have a really funny story about that. So let's see. He was a 350-pound O lineman. we were treating him for knee pain, and oh my God, he just had just massive legs, right? So we were doing some PNF patterns with him, and yeah, I just was not prepared for that level of weight and mass and strength that he's able to put out, right? So it was good. I forget what the comment he said. I was like, man, your leg is just so heavy. And he started laughing. He was like, maybe you're just too weak. And I was like, all right, that's fair enough. Fair enough.
So you gotta do body mechanics. Body mechanics are key.
Yeah. Right. So it takes living it to a whole new level. You really talked about having to keep yourself in shape. So yeah, I can definitely identify with. All right, I have another really similar question, but before we get to that, I just want to remind viewers, make sure you're using the hashtag ExchangeSA when you're sending out all of your tweets, or if you're talking on Twitter or Facebook about this, please use that hashtag so then everyone can join the conversation. Okay, so I just really want to wrap this conversation up. There's one more question that's really similar. Just want to give a shout out. So Josh K asks, sports PT seems like a pipe dream. How can students really make it a reality? Is there anything else that you two have on this conversation? Mike, we'll start with you.
I think it's important for students to separate themselves from the crowd. You graduate, you're a DP student, you get out there, congratulations, you're one of what? I'm just throwing the 2,000 with those kind of qualifications. Well, if you can find some specialty you can bring to the table that makes you one of 200 or one of 20, your odds are so much better. So don't just follow the crowd. Find something different. And I use this example a lot. I speak to students a lot, and I say, well, what if 10 years ago you became a physical therapist to work with snowboarders or skateboarders? People think you're crazy, but now it's in X Games, it's in the Olympics, as snowboarding is. Now you're ahead of the curve. Well, find out what's out there. Find new sports, find new specialties, find new qualifications that you could add to your repertoire, add to your toolbox. So when you get out there and you're looking for these jobs and you're trying to make that quote unquote pipe dream a reality, you can say, look what I have, look what I'm bringing to the table. Because Sue will tell you that in the roles that we had as head athletic trainers and physical therapists, we had to bring a lot of specialists in to help us do our job. It wasn't just, we knew it all, so to speak. Be one of those specialties. Be one of those specialists. Bring those things in. So I think creating that, separating yourself from the crowd in a good way now is a great way to position yourself to be that person that they want you and they need you in that situation to take care of their athletes.
Yeah. Awesome. Sue, any thoughts?
Gosh, yeah, I think that's a great answer. Yeah, I think sometimes we get so wrapped up in sort of that dual credential. Well, I have to be a PTAT in order to get those types of jobs. And I think maybe it was like that 20 years ago. And I don't think it's like that now. I think there's a lot of opportunities for people who are physical therapists and not necessarily also athletic trainers to have these jobs as well, and just different jobs. Organizations are looking at hiring not only athletic trainers anymore, and not only strength coaches, but physical therapists and yoga instructors and massage therapists and acupuncturists, and right, like there's so many different disciplines. So as Mike said, don't think that you've got to just do that dual credential PTAT. I mean, doing kind of doing the PT strength coach stuff, or doing the PT yoga stuff, or PT mindset stuff, as Mike kind of, just to build on what he said about kind of setting yourself apart, like what are some different things other than trying to be that dual credentialed PTAT? There's other ways to sort of have multiple experiences and expertise. And I think Mike hit it, right on the head. To have something that separates you from the crowd is pretty cool.
Yeah. So Sue, you actually just set us up perfectly to hit this next question. Actually, a couple questions out of the park. So two very similar questions. So Jillian McLean and Keypack ask about the dual credential DPT ATC. So why would one pursue those, and does having those give you a leg in sports physical therapy? So Sue, we'll start with you.
Sure. Yeah, I think, like I said, I think 20 years ago, yeah, you absolutely had to have that athletic training certificate. And now I don't think so. I know the NFL requires teams to have a physical therapist on staff. I don't know if Major League Baseball does either, but certain organizations are sort of requiring that. And I kind of always tell people, when people say to me, oh, well, I want to work in sports, so I think I should go back and get my athletic training degree. And I always tell them, if you don't want to be an athletic trainer, like, don't go get a degree because you think it's going to maybe get you that. Like, if you don't want to be an athletic trainer, don't go get that degree. I mean, find out what athletic training is, right? There's overlaps between athletic training and physical therapy, but they are certainly not the same. And they're very different. And so, but at the same time, there's overlap. So look into what athletic training actually is. And if you don't want to pursue that education, then don't do it because you think you have to have that dual credentialed. I think there's plenty of opportunities, especially in this day and age, where organizations are hiring multiple disciplines to help their players, that you need to sort of just focus on what interests you and sort of not worry necessarily about the letters behind your name. The letters behind your name are helpful, so people will look at you and give you an opportunity at times, potentially. But don't get too wrapped up in defining yourself by those letters, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Mike, any thoughts to contribute there?
I agree, but I have to say in the NFL setting, I think that athletic trainer, those letters, so to speak, carry a lot more weight. And I don't think it's an absolutely necessary because, like Sue said, about, I want to say it's about 5 years ago is when the NFL required to have at least one physical therapist per staff. But I'd be willing to venture, I'm guessing at least 30 out of 32 of those are ATC as well, because I think it's important, maybe not necessarily to have those letters, but it can kind of show, and at least in the NFL, that you've had a lot of experience in those football settings. Because I think it's kind of hard to find a physical therapist that's had 10 years of in the athletic training room, athletic training kind of setting experience as a physical therapist. So I think having the exposure, for instance, one big component of the job is taping ankles and taping knees and having the skills there. Well, if you're a physical therapist, you may not have that kind of exposure unless you're in that setting for a long period of time. So rehab is one part of it, but like Sue alluded to, we do a lot of the things, and it's not just the physical therapy. That's a very important part of what we do, but there's a lot of the things that we do, and those skills of athletic training, the evaluation skills and the taping and some of those other blue-collared athletic training responsibilities, if you will, I think you have to have those. Even if you don't have the letters, I think you have to have them. Again, you're competing with a lot of people that may have dual credentials. And I think a good way to look at it is say, what does an athletic trainer, physical therapist need in that kind of setting? And you want to have those requirements if you're looking in the NFL setting. But again, a lot of that depends on what that specialty is and what professional sport. But I like the concept of working backwards and set it up with the end in mind. So you say, I want to work in this setting. Well, what does that setting require? And you start working back for those requirements. Okay, I want to do that in the next 2 years. I need to get my massage therapy degree, or I have to get a lot more exposure in yoga or balance or ART. And working with the end in mind and getting those skills now, for that interview, you have the ability to bring to the table things that they want, and more importantly, things they need. You don't want to make it a convenience of them hiring you. You want them to need you.
Yeah.
And I think if you do that in a way of saying this is what they need, and you prepare yourself accordingly, that's how you're going to separate yourself from the crowd. That's how you're going to prepare yourself for that job.
I think that's a great point, Mike. I think that starting with that end in mind and where you want to work is huge, because I think I taped 2 ankles in 6 years of baseball, and you taped 2 ankles in 5 minutes on a Monday.
2 minutes.
Under 2 minutes.
If it was 5, I would have been fired.
So I think that's a great point, is that each league and each sport and everything just requires so many different skill sets and so many different things that to just go out and randomly get letters because you think that that's going to help you isn't the way to go. I think Mike's exactly right. Start with your end game in mind. Where do you want to work? Where do you want to be? What's the requirements of that? And if you absolutely need that athletic training degree to do that, then you better start getting interested in athletic training. But if that's not what you need, then there's no point in just collecting letters for the sake of collecting letters.
Sure. And Cruz, can I add one thing here, kind of off on a side note? That
please.
I used to work with my students a lot, is be very good at doing interviews. Because think about could you think of a worse nightmare than have all these credentials, have all these skills, and sit there and interview and blow the interview? I know a guy who interviewed for an NFL satellite program to get in there, and when he walked into the interview, his fly was wide open.
Oh,
The guy said, I couldn't even tell what color his underwear was. And he said, I laughed all the way through the interview. This guy didn't stand a chance. He blew an NFL opportunity because his fly was wide open. And I'm not saying it comes that extreme or that humorous, but bottom line is work on the interview skills. What are you going to wear? What kind of questions you asked? But have those interviews, because we don't learn that in school. But that can be the difference between you and those 5 guys that interview of getting that job. And you got to nail that. I mean, you don't want to go back in your car and say, I blew it. You know, I had that checkered tie with the plaid shirt and the checkered jacket, and I look like a clown. That's why I didn't get the job. Stupid example, but bottom line is you want those skills. So when you sit down, you get that dream job, you hit it out of the park, and you walk away with not a job, a career. There's a big difference.
Yeah, I love that, and I also love the conversation you both talked about is not collecting letters for the sake of collecting letters. So I think there's a lot of students. Sue, earlier you mentioned strength coaches and developing experience in that field. But I know there's a lot of students, I know because they ask me a lot of times is, how can I improve my strength and conditioning programming skills and all of that? And I always talk to them about, like, don't just collect the letters for collecting letters, right? Do you actually have experience working with individuals, training individuals, programming? I mean, it's so important to actually live it and do it rather than just have the letters. I think there's nothing worse than having those letters and then not being able to demonstrate those skills. So I appreciate you both talking about that. Okay, next question. This one, Sue, this is for you. So, yes. So Sue, you're just such a prolific figure, I know, for women especially in the field. So this question is from a female, SPT. So Samantha Perry asks, what do you believe is the primary reason for the lack of female sports PTs in the profession? Tough question. She put you on the hot seat. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm going to kind of go to, oh gosh, I'm going to butcher her name, which is unfortunate. Is it Sheryl Sandberg from Facebook? That she wrote the Lean In book. I don't know if you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I can't remember her name. But I read her book called Lean In, and I think that she makes some fantastic points in there that I agree with and that I hadn't even really thought about, quite frankly. I think, unfortunately, because of straight biology, women take themselves out of the workforce because most women are going to end up having children, right? Like, let's hope that continues, or the human race is going to end rather soon. So, most women are going to end up having children and have families. And until we can figure out how to get, men to breastfeed, then these women need to stay home and take care of the baby. So I think sometimes that in preparation for that, which she points out in her book, that in preparation for that, sometimes women take themselves out of the workforce in advance. Meaning, well, we're probably going to have a baby next year, so I'm not going to apply for that job. Or, or I'm getting married and then we're going to start to have kids, so I'm not going to apply for that job. So not only do they not get the job because maybe they are going to have a family or people are afraid of that, but they remove themselves from the opportunity before they even are told no. Because they're thinking, oh, in a year or two, we're going to start a family, so I'm not going to apply for that management position, or I'm not going to apply for that job. And I think she makes a good point. I think sometimes that women do that. They just sort of take themselves out of it before they even give someone the opportunity to tell them no. And I definitely have made some life choices in my time. It would have been very difficult to have my career if I had kids. And so, I don't have kids. I've got a cute little wiener dog that's sitting right next to me. I don't know if you can see him, but yeah, so I have, and there's a random fly that is attacking me. So if you see me doing this, that's all. But yeah, so I think there's some definite life choices there that people have to make. And I think that my advice there would be, don't take yourself out of the market before it's time, which I think a lot of women do because they're preparing for that time 1, 2, 3 years down the road.
Yeah. Hey, so just so you're aware, that name is correct. So we just looked it up. You killed it on that, on target there. And
it's a great book. It's an unbelievable book.
And actually, shout out to Sharon Dunn, our APTA president. She actually mentioned that book in our last exchange chat. So there was a similar question along the lines of females in the leadership of physical therapy, at the very top. And she talked about that book as well. So it's great to hear you both mention that, two prolific women in our physical therapy organization association talking about the same book. So for all of the females out there, I mean, that's two very high up women talking about that. You got to go read it. So
yeah, because it's not just in sports medicine, it's in private practice ownership, it's within any type of leadership and management position. So it's not just a sports medicine problem, it's a problem across the board.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for your thoughts on that. All right. So next question. We're getting pretty close to the end here. Wow, it's gone by so quick. Okay, so Celeste asks, thoughts on the treatment and research available to elite athletes becoming accessible to grassroots athlete in outpatient clinics. Mike, we can start with you. Let me know if you need me to repeat that at all.
Yeah, I got lost a little bit on that one.
Yeah, so the question's from Twitter. So the question is, any thoughts on the treatment and research available to elite athletes becoming accessible to grassroots athletes in outpatient clinics?
I guess what she's asking is for elite athletes to be rehabbed in a more traditional athletic physical therapy settings.
Yeah, I think that may be it. I will double check. You can start if you'd like on that, and then I'll kind of try and think about it myself. Twitter's kind of tricky because you only get 144 characters.
Oh, yeah,
so
you have to be creative. I think the thought is, I may be off here, but the traditional physical therapy setting, the grassroots physical therapy settings, being able to rehab elite athletes. And I think they have a lot of the skills that are there and a lot of the ability to do it because a lot of it's being creative. I mean, some of the things that we do in an athletic setting for elite athletes isn't the most expensive machines, isn't the most expansive setting. A lot of it is that the diagnostic tools. And I think going back to student athletic trainers, like I always say, a physical therapist, I always say it always comes back to anatomy. The more anatomy you know, the better your evaluation skills are, the better you can rehab, the biomechanics are better, your evaluation, your bilateral symmetry, lower extremity biomechanics, all those things really come down to anatomy. So I think whether you're in a high fancy glitter, gold-ridden athletic physical therapy setting, or you're in, like she says, a grassroots setting, I think it's what you're bringing to the table in your evaluation skills and putting those athletes through the workouts they need to get ready where they are, that assessment component, as well as that getting them back to the high performance. You don't have to be in those fancy settings all the time. So I think any setting you're in, bringing those kind of skill sets and working with the athletes and the skills that you bring there, don't get caught up in how expensive things are around you. It's what you have inside your knowledge that you're bringing to that athlete. And that's what they're going to know and that's what they're going to appreciate. And I think the thing I always used to use with athletes is if they come in and they say, hey, I don't know what that is, that tool or that piece of equipment or what you did there, that's what I want. If the athletes are requesting it, even if they don't know what the name of it is, that's a great sign that they got better and their intuition and their body is saying, that helped me. That's a great sign of what gives something validity to say, hey, this is working for what I need to do and taking care of these athletes.
That's great. Yeah, that's a great answer. Sue, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I kind of took the question as sort of how do maybe your average, for lack of a better word, your average outpatient orthopedic clinic maybe sort of get more educated on some of the amazing tools that the pros have access to.
Yeah.
And so maybe I always encourage people who, if you're working in general outpatient orthopedics and kind of want to expand that sports performance program, to see what the pros are doing. Most pros have conferences, right? So PVATS has a conference every January. I know PFATS has a conference, like a portion of the conference at the NATA. I know the MLS has a portion of their conference, as well as the NHL has a portion of their conference that's open to the public or for people who work in hockey sort of outside of the NHL. And so same thing with MLS. And so, or to go to those international Olympic Committee conferences. So to kind of get yourself to those higher level conferences, to see what people are doing at that level. And then somehow figuring out how to apply it to your clinic. You know, like Mike said, you don't always have to have the big fancy equipment. Interesting to hear those ideas and how people are doing it, but then how can you take that stuff and apply it to your clinic that doesn't have the unlimited budget and doesn't have, you know, the space for some of that stuff. But in order to manipulate it and apply it to your setting, you've got to see what's even happening out there first. So, you know, to kind of get yourself to some of those sports specific conferences that these leagues put on, not only nationally, but internationally, is really, really, I think, a great way to do that.
And Cruz, one thing, if I could add on that, those are great points, Sue. And I think your direction on that question was right. I think mine was off base. So bravo on that. but one quick point I recommend to students, and I did this, and it's a lot cheaper than going to a big conference and trying to find a hotel room and all that, is for $20. These students, they find someone who's doing something that they want to do, and just call them up and say, hey, can I buy you a free lunch for 30 minutes of your time? And anybody is going to want to say, yeah, I'd take you up on a free lunch. You get an opportunity. Win there, cost you $20 for a couple lunches and a couple bottles of water, and sit down with those individuals and asking key questions for 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And when that time comes up, you say, hey, you promised me 30 minutes, I want to leave. Most people will say, sit back down. They give you another half an hour. You get a great opportunity, great recommendation, and you get the inside scoop on these people that are doing exactly what you want to do for $20. And having great questions, not how much money do you make, but, you know, things like, again, it kind of became earlier talk about great questions. Asking the question like, what's the worst part of your job? Everybody has a bad part of the job. So finding those kind of things with those key individuals, now you get the real inside scoop. You say, I like this or I don't like this. You get a great reference. You get a great recommendation for those individuals. There's just so much upside. Again, for a mere $20. I did that all the time. I got in with a lot of key people that really opened the doors, and some of them are still mentors to this day.
Mm-hmm.
That is awesome. So simple, and would have never thought of that. So
yeah, a lot of things we do in this profession don't have to be complicated.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that's a good example of keeping it simple.
Yeah, you'll be surprised who says yes.
Right. Incredible. So we just dropped one more tweet. So everyone, if you're on Twitter, please check out this last tweet. So as we're wrapping this up, would love for you all to answer after this exchange chat on SportsPT, the good, the bad, and the future. I am going to. So what did you take from this exchange chat? What are you going to include? What steps are you going to take to try and really get more involved in sports physical therapy if that's your interest? So as we're wrapping up, I do have one more question for you if you wouldn't mind both answering. So we titled this strategically, and I think we talked a lot about the good, the bad, and the future, but maybe just wrapping it up one more time. What if you could say one thing about each of those three categories? Mike, we can start with you. What would you say the good, the bad, and the future is of sports physical therapy?
I
putting you on the hot seat. Loaded question.
I'm fine with that. I think the good is we still get the opportunity to put our hands on the athletes. That's what we love to do. We don't want to be administrators. So the good is people are still going to need these things right here. This is the most important, expensive modality you have. Don't forget about those. Forget about the equipment. Focus on these. So I think the good is we still got our hands on the athlete. I think the bad is it's going to take a lot more creativity. It's going to take a lot more people into the equation. You're going to have to work with people outside your specialties, and you're going to have to get used to it because that's not going to change anytime soon. And I think the future is going to come down to that area between the strengthening department and the rehab department are going to get a lot closer. They're going to start commingling a little bit more. So I think it's important that we realize what's going on in the weight rooms. We realize what strengthening components, performance stuff that these athletes are doing. We have to realize what they're doing in that room, and we have to open up and share those things with the strength coaches and the strength specialists. But I still think it's very important that there's still a distinction between the two, and you don't want non-physical physical therapy, athletic trainer, medical kind of people doing rehab kind of techniques, because that turf, although they're kind of working together, we can't let that get away from us in a sense of getting people doing things that they're not qualified to do. Just like we wouldn't be in there showing them how to do power cleans. So I think, yeah, we're commingling, we're working together in the future, but we still need to know where our role is and staying in our lane. I think that's real important.
Love that answer. Sue, what about you?
That's great. This is such a great question. There's so many things that are good and so many categorized as bad, and such cool things ahead, no doubt. But I think the good about Sports PT is you do get to work with some really incredible people, inside, who are attached to some really amazing bodies on the outside, and sort of having the opportunity to be able to work with those people and see how amazing the human body can be and how resilient it is at that level is really, to me, like one of the most fun things and amazing things about my job as a sports physical therapist. The bad, I think, is sometimes you do have to make some life choices that maybe are difficult. They're not right or wrong, but they are difficult, whether it comes to family or even, Mike, I'm sure, we both could hash out, how many weddings we've missed and how many funerals we've missed and how many reunions we've missed. Those are unfortunately sometimes things that choices that you have to make. And they're not right or wrong. They're just choices that you have to come to face with at times. And I think that can be very difficult for everybody involved. So I think, to me, sometimes that would be categorized under the bad. And then I think the future, I think, is really going to come down to better assessments and better understanding of load tolerance, and trying to figure out, the holy grail question of how do we prevent injury. We are never going to find the answer to that question. Physics happens. So until we can figure out how to overrule physics, I think people are going to continue to be injured. But that's sort of that holy grail question, right, that everybody wants to know is not only how do we prevent injuries, but if they do happen, how do we get them back quicker, and how do we get them back at a pace that's maybe bigger, faster, stronger than they were before. And so I think we're getting better at assessment. I think we're getting better at injury tracking. I think technology is an amazing thing right now that can really help people manage an athlete. There's so many different pieces of technology out there that people can use. It can get overwhelming, and that can definitely then be shifted over to the bad category, where people are utilizing technology in a way that's almost overwhelmed and they can't utilize that information. But I think that is the future, is continuing to try to quantify what will constitute an injury, what will predict injury, hopefully what could prevent that injury, and if the injury does occur, how do we get that person back faster? And I think technology is going to be a big piece of that.
Yeah. Really great answers on both of you. So coming from both of you, excuse me. Thank you both for that. So just wrapping this up, we always like to allow our guests to ask the audience one question. So what would you like our audience to answer? What would you love to leave them with and hope that they take away from this conversation? Sue, we can start with you.
What question would I have for them? I think you sort of already posed it. What are they going to do? What's their next step? How are they going to, what's their action item? And it needs to be like a small, tangible action item, not someday I'm going to work in the NFL. That's great, and I hope that is. But what's your tangible action item that you can do within the next 2 to 4 weeks to make that happen?
There you go, everyone. So Sue asked, what's your tangible action item that you're going to do soon, like in the next week, to get closer to your goal? Mike, what about you?
I'd probably say, what's your internal message? To kind of go more cranial on what Sue's saying is, what are you telling yourself? It's easy to say, I want to do this. I want to work in the NFL. I want to work in Major League Baseball. But what's your message? What are you telling yourself when you're out there working hard and putting a lot of effort into it? I think that's key. And I think kind of piggyback on that, my B answer would be, don't be afraid to put in the time. We're in an instant now. Everybody wants instant Wi-Fi, instant coffee, instant gratification, all these things. Those great jobs don't come from just doing it. It just doesn't happen. They don't just drop into your lap. and it takes a lot of time and patience, and the people that kind of earn it. So I guess my thought would be, what kind of blue collar job are you going to do that most people don't want to do? Like the old saying is, successful people consistently do what unsuccessful people don't want to do. So I guess my question is, what are those non-glamorous jobs that you're going to do that's going to earn you the right to get you your dream job?
Awesome.
I have a
Awesome. Do it. Go for it.
There you go.
To piggyback off of Mike, which I love, we didn't talk about it, but there's a book that I love, another book that I love too. It's called Start With Why, and that I would ask people, like, what is their why? Why do you want to work in sports medicine? Do you want to work in sports medicine because you think it's glamorous, because you think it's cool, because you like the sport, because you couldn't be a professional athlete yourself, so this is the next best way to get to the league, like, or is it because you want to work with that caliber athlete, or you have a desire to do something specific? Like, what's your why, and why do you want to work in sports physical therapy so badly? Because I think you need to have, to piggyback off of Mike's, what's your internal message? Like, why do you want to do that? Like we've already talked about, you're going to have to make a lot of personal sacrifices, and if you don't have the right why and the right reasoning to pursue that, then those choices are going to be more difficult. So yeah, what's your why? Why do you want to work in sports med?
Great point.
Awesome. Before we wrap everything up, Sue, how can everyone get in touch with you? Where's maybe some contact information that you're willing to share? Would love for people to reach out to you if you're willing.
Yep, absolutely. So probably the easiest way is on social media. So it's at Sue Falsone on Twitter. I think it's at Sue Falsone on Instagram, and I think at Sue Falsone on LinkedIn. I was not super creative with my social media handles. And I think Facebook is just Sue Falsone, but I'm sort of approaching that limit where Facebook is going to implode if I continue accepting friends. So I have to create a new account. So Instagram and Twitter are probably better.
There you go. There you go. Awesome. And Mike, what about you?
Probably through my website, MikeRyanSportsMedicine.com. Or Twitter always works for me as well, which is Ryan Sports Med. And Facebook, I think, is Mike Ryan Sports Medicine as well. So I think those are the ways that anybody can get a hold of me. But again, I too, like Sue, reply back to emails, always willing to help students. And I think Sue and myself have something in common. We've had a lot of people who have helped us to get to where we want to be. And we're always willing to give back and help students that really want to put the effort into, making a difference. Because again, they're the future. They're the ones that are going to help these athletes down the road. So getting those good quality people that are going to take care of people and athletes that we care about, that's why this profession is so cool.
Yeah. Agreed. They're, you two are perfect examples of helping all of us out, myself and all of the viewers on right now. So with that, won't take any more of your time. Thank you both so much for agreeing to come on for an hour and do this chat with us. I think there is a lot of value in it. So for those of you listening, would just please love a shout out. You heard their Twitter handles and their Facebook and all their social media now. So please reach out and thank them. So thank you both so much. With that, we will leave you all. Have a great night. Have a great weekend. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Cruz.
Bye, everyone. Great seeing you, Sue. Take care.
Good seeing you, Mike.
Thank you, Cruz.